This week might be the start of a torture chamber series here on the channel. The first video being this pillar with these archways for the ceiling supports that give the illusion that you would see of a dungeon or torture chamber in the basement of a castle. And it's going to be packed with chains, a brazier, some skulls, and a hanging cage that can be opened and closed. As well as showing off the new Monkstone Miniature Kickstarter, where I'm going to paint up this guy that goes absolutely perfect with this build. That's coming up right now on Tabletop Witchcraft. Hey there, and welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week I wanted to tackle a pillar, but not just any pillar. I wanted to have something that would give you the illusion that you were in a torture chamber or the dungeon of a castle. Now, in a lot of the movies that I've seen growing up, whenever you enter the torture chamber or the dungeon of a castle, you always see those really cool arched ceilings. And that's what I tried to achieve here in this build. Now, I had to pack it full of details, like this glowing brazier that pops on and off, super simple. We got some skulls, a bunch of chains hanging off of this thing. A really cool cage here that actually opens and closes so you can put your PCs in there, NPCs. You can even use it for a really elaborate dice jail. So I'm going to show you how to do that, as well as getting my hands on the new Monkstone Miniature Kickstarter. There's 7 miniatures in there. I'm going to show that whole Kickstarter off to you in this video as well as painting up this guy that goes absolutely perfect with this build. So if you're ready, let's go grab some supplies and let's get crafting. Alright, so what we want to do is start out by cutting a bunch of different rectangular shapes for this column. It would be pretty boring if we made one straight rectangular piece from the bottom all the way to the top. So as many different times as we can vary that, that's what we're going to do. Now using the plans, we can get all the proper dimensions. If you don't want to pick them up, you can just kind of wing it a little bit. If you do want to pick them up and help support the channel, there'll be a link in the description below. So we're just going to use the Proxxon to cut a bunch of different sizes here, making sure we got some safety protection on. And we're going to stack these up in this manner. You can make all those cuts pretty quick using just an Alpha knife too if you want. You don't need to use the Proxxon. And this is an interesting little cut. We're going to need 4 of these, and these are what actually make up the vaulted ceiling, typical of what you would see in the dungeon of a castle. Now you want to make sure to have the heat turned down pretty low on your Proxxon, because we're going to cut these freehand, and if it's too hot, the foam is going to move around on you too quick, and it's going to be a lot harder to make these cuts. Now, I thought originally I would have those feathered down all the way to like nothing, like that one on the left, but it was going to be way too hard to work with that foam, and honestly, I think it looks better cutting it squared off like that. Now we can use the plan to get an idea of this angled section here on the base of the pillar. And I'm just using the next size up of the pillar, as you can see, to stencil this out. Then using the Alpha knife, we can just kind of taper that off. And just take your time with this, as long as you don't rush and you get yourself started off on the proper line, making sure to connect them as you're cutting. It should be pretty easy to do. Now this is really important. We want to add some 1.5-inch washers to the bottom of this build because it's going to be a little heavy on the left side because of the cage that we're going to add. So as you've seen in a lot of my videos, we're just going to carve out a section here in the bottom using an X-Acto knife and the clay sculpting tool. That way we can insert 4 or so of these washers in the bottom. And as you're going to see later on in the video, we're going to add even more to another section. Now once the washers are in place, I didn't add any hot glue to the center. That way I could add this barbecue skewer to the middle, then hot glue it. That way it'll hold that in place real nice. Then, just like making a skewer that you're going to throw on the barbecue, we're going to just skewer all these different sections right on top of that. Pretty simple. Okay, so I wanted some really nice detail in this build. And, you know, I didn't want to place a bunch of separate blocks, but I also didn't want this to look like I drew them on. So after drawing them on, I took an X-Acto and made a couple of cuts with those lines, and I was able to get some pretty wide grout lines between the blocks, and it really made these look like they were individually placed. Now for the smaller brick, I didn't want the grout lines as big, smaller bricks, smaller grout lines, so I just used a pen to make those. Now really important, using this sculpting tool that I've made, I'll put a link up above to the video where you can see me talking about it. I individually add the stone texture to each block. It's going to be a lot more believable than just rolling this whole thing flat with one solid piece of aluminum foil. I learned that trick from Gerard over at Shifting Lands. He's got a lot of really cool tips over there. Alright, now we're going to add some texture to these arched sections, and then we're going to take a toothpick, a little hot glue, and we're going to use that to help secure all of these arched sections onto this pillar. And I like to work with hot glue. It allows me to keep working, moving quickly, and not having to wait for tacky glue or regular PVA glue to set up. And as you can see, I didn't waste time by texturing behind where these arches are going to go. So anything little like that you can do to help save time when crafting, try and do that. Alright, now we're going to have a cage hanging from these archways. So we need some supports that are going to hold that chain in place. We're going to do that by using some paper clips, and the mounting bracket's going to be made out of foam. And don't worry when you push the paper clip through the foam if you have to readjust where the hole is going to be, or if it cuts or makes a little bit bigger of a hole than you want. As you can see, it looks like that in the middle one there. When we Mod Podge this, those holes are going to get filled in anyway. Now using a little bit of super glue, which yes melts foam, and I used it on purpose, we're going to attach a few rhinestones, and I like that because it gives the illusion of some of the stone chipping away around the rhinestones as if when they were being hammered into the stone. Then we take some Mod Podge, real thin, paint it on there. We don't want to lose that detail. And I'm taking some Deco Art Burnt Sienna, mixing in with the black, and we're going to use this as a base coat. Now I had a lot of different layers of paint in this build. I'm not sure if you would get the same look if you skip some of these steps. Maybe you could. You'll notice here I'm adding some tile grout now, and then when we add some water, that's going to help lock all that in place. And it really is changing the overall color of this, but the final look of this build when it was done, I absolutely loved the grungy, grimy look. So if you want to get the exact same color pattern that I have, you're going to want to follow the colors that you see on all those post-it notes in the background. Now I just used a little bit of regular Vallejo pigment for this, the brickwork. I wanted that to stand out just a little bit different. And then a pretty heavy overcoat of these two grays mixed together on this. Now keep in mind it's going to get knocked down big time once we add the black wash to it. And I haven't made one of these before, so here I go adding the black wash to the paint job that I had, and you can see here in just a second I'm gonna actually stall because this got really dark and kind of covered up a lot of the grout that I had placed in there. But I just kept moving along with it, and it really turned out nice. It gave a nice dark kind of brown to that grout. When we do our dry brush here of the slate gray, it really turned out really nice. Made everything stand out really nice. Now this little piece you'll find on the plan, it's going to be a little ledge. The reason we add that magnet is we're going to add a brazier that's going to attach to that can come on and off nice and easy. And to do so, we're going to use this balloon magnet. Now we don't need this little clip on the bottom, so I'm just using a pair of wire cutters to snip that right off. And I'll put a link up above to my crystal video. I use this technique to make crystals or fire, and all we're doing is taking a glue stick, heating up the bottom of it, pressing it right onto the light or diode, and then we're going to sculpt our flame right onto that. And I take the Ulfa knife here just to kind of shape the hot glue stick before I melt it roughly into the shape of the flame that I want, twirling the flame up towards the top. Now as we get towards the very peak, as you can see right about here, I'm pausing and I'm going to blow on that hot glue to help cool it quickly. That way if I don't pull away, I don't get like a big string of hot glue. Alright, we got a nice hot brazier. Now, something to note, this metal for the balloon light here is very slick, so we want to take some sandpaper to that. That way the paint will hold. Now, this is the same paint method that I'm going to use on all the metal objects in this video, so this is the only time I'm going to show it. We're going to hit a base coat of black primer on it. Then we're going to use some dark aluminum. Then once that dries, we're going to use some typhus corrosion on that aluminum, followed by a dry brush of Brazier rust on the bottom left. And then finally, I'm going to use some black pigments to add some soot to this and lock it in with some pigment fixer. Then I'm going to poke a little hole into the base here. This is going to be the little apparatus that's going to help raise and lower the cage that we're going to put in here. And that's just a little dowel stick that I cut up. Alright, now to work on the cage. These are some 2-inch Reaper miniature bases. And we're going to make our base and our ceiling of the cage out of that. And the bars are going to be made out of these skewers. Now, you can notice my plans in the background. They're going to change throughout this, this build. As you can see, I thought it'd be nice to have the locations drawn out, so I drew that by hand on the left. But I'm going to actually do that digitally for the final set of these plans. And now we just need a little bit of hot glue to hold these in place. We're only going to hot glue in 5 of these into the base. And they don't have to be held in real secure, because you'll see here in just a minute how we're actually going to lock these in. Where the 6th bar would go, we're still going to add some hot glue, but we're going to take one of our 6mm by 3mm magnets and slap that right into place. Alright, now so I thought I'd save some time and squirt some of this epoxy right into the base, mix it up and spread it around. This is going to work really awesome to lock these bars in place. But it wasn't the best idea because it's hard to really make sure to get 100% mix on both parts of the 2-part epoxy. So I would recommend doing this in a separate container and then adding it. Now we're not worried about these little wisps of hot glue, no big deal. Just make sure to press that into place on the second base, spreading those bars out along the perimeter of the mini base. And all those rest of the glue, you're never going to see it because we're going to obviously fill that in with some epoxy as well. Now make sure to mirror the magnet on the bottom as well as the top. And then just add again a little bit more epoxy to lock in the other side. Now we take the good old method of super glue and baking powder, and we're going to just spread that all around on here, dip that in place, and it's got a really nice, rusted look to the entire cage when we're done. Then I just took a little bit of chipboard and adding a little bit of super glue to it. We can press that around the cage for the rest of the bars. And chipboard likes to spread apart on you when you start messing with it and bending it, so I just added a little bit of super glue to the ends to make sure it doesn't come apart on me. And as you can see, the plans are evolving. I've since added the location of all the bars on the plan. And these bars themselves are going to change in height. The first 5 we put in are the longest. Then you're going to have 2 medium bars that are going to be the length from the bottom to the ceiling with the epoxy in, which is that one right there. And then you're going to have a really short one, only one of them. And that's because you're going to have to actually add super glue to 2 magnets and glue that to the bar itself, because this door is going to swing open and close on us. Now we use a little bit of accelerant on the other end of that stick, and that's going to be really nice to help quickly secure that super glue right to the bar. And what you don't want to do is super glue your fingers together like that. Now just using a little bit more super glue, I'm going to just put it on there just to help lock those magnets in place and roll it around in some of that accelerant. Alright, the bars for the door themselves, I needed to have them stuck in one spot so I can get the rounded section right here in place. I just used a little bit of tack to hold them temporarily there and super glued all of this right into place. Adding some more baking powder and super glue will add a really nice look to that when we're done. Now some more super glue on the top, coupled with some rhinestones, will add that illusion of some nice rivets around the top of the cage. And then I just took a circular piece of foam, placed it on top. I added a little bit of texture. I didn't want it to look like it was stone, which it isn't. It's going to be metal, but I didn't want to leave it smooth either, so I just, roughed it up just a little bit. Now on the top of the cage, we're going to use a smaller disc. And you can see I kind of coned out the inside, carved it out. We're going to pull the chain through that, really squirt some hot glue into that chain so that it becomes one solid mass. Put some around the perimeter, and when we place this on top, that chain will never slip out of this and will hold it in place real nice. You want to make sure to get that also right in the center so that it hangs straight. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this paint job is going to be exactly the same as the brazier that we did earlier. And all I'm doing is adding a little bit of riser rust. As you can see, I'm just showing you a really quick overview of some of the metal parts on the build. Now obviously where this brazier is going to be, we need lots of black pigment powder. I wanted a really big brazier, something that would be really big and hot and make it like a, really just a nasty prison torture chamber environment. So we're going to throw a lot of pigment powder on here, as well as obviously the big fire for the brazier itself. And we're going to lock all that in with just a little bit of pigment fixer. Okay, now I don't know the last time I saw somebody in a dungeon with any spick and span, so we're going to have to add a bunch of pigment powder as well around this base to dirty this up. Any place that would pick up dust and debris, like the shelf around the base, as well as the very top of the craft here. Alright, when I was done with this cage, I did rust it all up, but I ended up washing it afterwards. I kind of did that backwards, and I wanted to try something different here. Instead of just sticking with the typhus corrosion and the riser rust, I'm going to now go to some medium rust pigment powder and lay that on kind of heavy around all the spots where there would be a joint, or where metal would be contacting another section of metal, where water might build up. So we're going to start with some medium rust, then in just a few areas we're going to add some light rust. This added a really, really cool rust effect to this cage. And then obviously we're going to lock this in. When I'm working on small things like this, I like to lock it in with pigment fixer. Large areas like the top of the pillar, I lock that in with some rubbing alcohol. Now I had to show this whole thing. Actually, I'm making a mess here. This is a very tiny magnet with some super glue. I should have did this on, some parchment paper or whatever. But we're going to add a little super glue to that, and then we're going to add it to the end of this chain. The reason we're going to do that is that it's going to allow us to take this cage on and off of the build as we want to. But I want to show this whole thing here because, this is pretty crazy. I don't know what are the chances are of this, but I'm going to actually kind of screw up here in a minute, and I want you to see what happens. You can see how powerful that magnet is. And I was kind of freaking out because I had put accelerant on this chain, so it's going to, cure instantly. But check this out. That magnet shot onto all that chain, literally on the very last ring. So the crafting gods were with me on that one. So once that's all set and ready to go, we can pull this chain now through all of these loops. And it's a little bit of a pain. It's not too bad, but you got to deal with that little magnet to try and get it through. But mostly, once you get this in place, you're not really going to take it off, but you can raise and lower it without having to go through those loops again. So just pull this up to whatever height you want, and then you can wrap it around this post here. And the cool thing is, you'll notice all I got to do is literally let go of the chain once I have it in place. It's going to snap right to the other piece of chain and hold it up real nice, unlike the build itself. So I was like all bummed out. I needed some counterweights on the other side. So I really didn't have any choice but to grab an Alpha knife and cut right into this craft. Again, on the plans, the final plans, it's going to show you doing this way before this part of the build. But I was lucky enough that I was able to fit these in and sneak them in to this joint right here on these blocks. So all I did was add about 4 washes on that piece in my right hand, and on the tower or the pillar itself I added about 2 on that. And as you can see, once we clean that little bit of glue up right there, you'll never even know that I cut into that. Then I grabbed one of my cogs. I got a whole bunch of these. They're like steampunk cogs. And again, I painted this up the same way I did all the other metal in this video. And just a little hot glue, pressing that right into place. And you can see the other chains that I hung from here. I like to, this part right here, you could actually add a bunch of different weapons. The chains on the left, you could have, a skeleton hanging from them. And these are just some Citadel skulls that I painted and put into place. That glue will dry clear once we're done. Now finally, we want to add some fine turf. I'm adding some burnt grass to this. I thought the regular fine turf, that's the green grass, was a little too green for this. And just sprinkle a little bit on and add a really nice color, something that this really needed. Not a lot, but just enough. Alright, so Jack from Monkstone Miniatures reached out to me a few months ago and asked if I would be interested in doing a video showcasing his new miniatures in his Kickstarter. And I said, let me take a look at them. And I did, and I was really impressed with the detail and the miniatures themselves. The main 3 in his Kickstarter are these pigmen, and I thought they were really neat. One of them fit in really well with this torture chamber, vaulted ceiling, cage video that I wanted to do. So I ran the idea past him. He liked it. So he sent me his box of 7 miniatures for his Kickstarter. So let's take these out, see what's in the box, paint them up, and then put them next to our build for this week's video and see what they look like all together. Okay, so let's see what we got here in this box. You'll notice that Jack did a really nice job with some of these cards here that have some really neat artwork and a cool description on the back of what each character is, in his own mind. So I had a really cool time reading all of these. Again, with the Kickstarter, you're going to get this hag here. He's got these 3 main pigs that come with the Kickstarter. And then he's got these 2 little guys, and then sort of like this traveler, which is this big snail. So as you can see, they're really different characters. And what I thought would be a really cool miniature for this video would be this guy right here. I thought he fit in really nice with the this build. So digging into the box a little bit, they're all packaged up pretty nice. Here they all are. They've got a lot of cool little features. Some of them come with like extra heads. All the pigs have multiple heads that you can pick from. If they've got a cowl or some sort of like armor on their head, they come with various different ones. So for example, like this guy right here, this is the one that we're going to be doing. And again, here's like the little hag and some of the smaller guys. And he's got some of these painted up on his website. I'll have a link in the description below if you want to go check it out. And we are going to paint this guy up right here for the video. And you can see, I'm going to put these together, but there's some really, really nice detail on these miniatures. And you can see that we'll rip that open. We're going to paint these up here anyway.
And you can see how you've got multiple different heads on each one. And it's really cool because, you know, the amount of detail and stuff that I like to put in my builds gives you options to do that. And also, you know, you can use these to mount on a wall if you want in a tavern, put them in a basket next to an executioner's station, all kinds of different things you can do with that. But we're going to use this head and put this guy together and see what he looks like when we're all done.
So Jack gave me some info on how he designs his minis and how he comes up with his lore, as well as some insight into what's coming next, and I wanted to share that with all of you. So Monkstone Miniatures is a brand new miniature company focusing on making high quality 28mm fantasy miniatures for tabletop gaming. These miniatures are set in a dark folklore setting of Dunmere, which is being developed alongside the miniatures, which in my opinion, you know, is really important because that's what makes a collection like this feel like they all live together and actually belong together as one set of miniatures. Dunmere itself draws inspiration from many medieval and fantasy settings, but has a strong basis in European folklore. So when designing creatures, Jack does a lot of research into different myths and legends behind them and uses that information to guide himself. For example, like he designs these Spriggans, and he read that they were ugly and often appeared looking as small, wizened old men with large heads. They also had a tendency for trickery and mischief and thievery, and you can see exactly how Jack incorporated all of that into these Spriggans. As well as sculpting the figures, he also writes and develops the setting of Dunmere, so I'll give you a really quick description of what Dunmere is in Jack's mind. So the kingdoms of Dunmere, according to Jack. Dunmere is a land that has never been truly tamed by human folk, and the follies of Biggin kings lay testament to this in the countless crumbling fortresses that remain. It is said that the great hearts in many of these strongholds still flicker with life. Boggart, Brownie, and Goblin kings now sit upon their rotting thrones, squabbling over scraps and fighting amongst themselves. Their reign often, like themselves, short and bloody. But it is not the hordes of boggarts that provide the most peril in Dunmere. Beyond their walls, the vast forests, our soaring peaks, are home to a myriad of beasts and monsters, and there are more fearsome things still. Unspeakable evils crawl up through the earth itself, black with slime and older than the rocks they seep from. These abominations infest the hearts and minds of good folk, corrupting even the purest in time. So that's pretty exciting if you ask me, to see what other kind of unspeakable evils Jack's going to come up with next. As for how you can get these miniatures, they will be on his website in the first half of 2021. And if you're interested in getting your hands on them, the best thing to do is to sign up for his newsletter on his website at www.monkstoneminiatures.com. Okay, I'm going to try something new on the channel, and that's a giveaway. If you want to be entered, all you have to do is leave a comment below if you'd like to see this be turned into a torture chamber series, and what kind of video you'd like to see added to that. You're also going to need an Instagram account because that's where I'm going to announce the winner. I'll do that next Friday on my story on Instagram. If you see a name there, all you have to do is send me a private message and I will email you the set of plans that you saw in this video. Now, as far as the build goes, I built one pillar, but I can already tell you I'm going to build 3 more because I can envision a big square room with one of these pillars in each of the 4 corners. It would make it look totally awesome. Add all kinds of details to the other pillars, like chains with skeletons hanging from them, weapons, and so on. And I'd like to also thank Jack from Monkstone Miniatures. Even though this video wasn't sponsored by them, I want to say thank you for sending me the Kickstarter, allowing me to take a look at them, paint one of them up for this video, and I can't wait to see what's going to come next from his line of miniatures. Please leave a comment, like, and share the video. Hit that bell notification for further videos here on Tabletop Witchcraft. Consider picking up some merchandise to help support the channel. And also, head on over to Patreon. It's support there that really helps fund the channel and helps me get the supplies I need to make these videos. As well as, today starts the craft off, the first ever, on our private Facebook page, The Coven, where you can be entered into that. All you have to do is join the Coven tier or higher on Patreon. The winner there is going to get a really cool gift from Paladin Woodworking, with a very special guest judge, Joe Levin from Encounter Terrain. Check him out on YouTube as well as his Instagram account. He is blowing up over there. He does some really amazing work. All right, until next time, I'll see you around.